The battle plans have been drawn for an all-out war within Africa. We are talking many African states who are willing to send in their troops into Niger, Africa to start a conflict to get rid of the coup within Niger, Africa. Now, here's where things get complicated. You have Mali, Africa, and Burkina Faso, Africa, who are willing to step up and step in for Niger to back them and to go to war with other African states. They are saying Niger, Africa has the right to defend themselves, to start a coup, to make their own government. Well, guess what? The U.S. military is smack dab in the middle of all of this, and I don't know where they're going to go, but one thing I do know, the battle plans are ready, and these African nations are ready to go to war.
West African defense chiefs have drawn up a plan for potential military intervention if Niger's coup is not overturned by the weekend. The Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, has taken a hard stance on last week's toppling of President Mohamed Bazoum. It's given Niger's coup leaders until Sunday to step down. It's the seventh coup in West and Central Africa since 2020. Western donors have cut support in protest, even though Niger relies on aid for 40% of its budget.
Real quick, if you're new to the party, there's something out there called the ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States. This is a coalition of African countries who work together, almost like NATO, if you will, but more so economically, but there is also some military sprinkled in there. What I mean by that is all of these countries have agreed that they're all going to fight together and all band together in case these militant groups try to take over another country. So Mali works with Niger, Niger will work with Burkina Faso, but here's what the issue is. You have countries within ECOWAS who have fallen to coups and are starting to pretty much raise some turmoil. For example, Mali, Africa, and Burkina Faso have fallen to coups, but they're also backed by Russia, and what they're doing is they're using Russian entities like Wagner and pushing out their militant groups into Niger. So now Niger is dealing with these militant groups, they're not able to get the job done, and now there's a coup, and now ECOWAS is afraid Russia is going to step in, and there's going to be more turmoil for these other ECOWAS states. That is why they're willing to step in with their militaries and end this now before every single country in ECOWAS falls to more militant groups and their economies crumble.
Late on Thursday, the country's new military junta revoked military cooperation pacts with former colonial power France. France said it was taking note of the junta's decision, while adding that those deals had to be signed with Niger's, quote, legitimate authorities.
Another really massive part of this story is that the French are not trusted anymore within Niger. Niger does not want any more French military support, no more French anything. They don't trust them, and they feel that France is taking advantage of Niger in a colonial type way. But here's what's interesting. There's been no speak of the United States. In fact, Niger has always welcomed and loved the United States. And that's where things get confusing, because now the United States is like, well, do we work with France or do we work with Niger? United States is not willing to call what's happening in Niger a coup. We'll get into that later, and we'll also get into why Russia is just ready to step right in. Nonetheless, let's watch the rest of this video.
France has between 1,000 to 1,500 troops in Niger, helping battle groups linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. The United States, Germany, and Italy also have troops stationed in Niger. The country has strategic significance for the U.S., China, Europe, and Russia, given its precious resources and its pivotal role in the war with Islamist rebels in the Sahel region.
And here's where the controversy is sort of happening. You have major military powers who are saying, look, we are in Niger not for your resources. We are here to fight militant groups who may potentially affect us and the rest of the world. So let us stay in your country because, again, Niger is in a perfect strategic position to attack other militant groups. I mean, they're right smack dab in the middle, and they're a good location for drone units and other special forces units. Also, Niger is used as a training hub for outside African nations to come into Niger and work together and hopefully try to form some sort of military union and cooperation, which is why ECOWAS seems to be falling apart. It's why Mali and Burkina Faso fell apart, and it looks like why Niger is falling apart, and it also looks like the U.S. military trained the rebels who took over Niger. That's a whole nother story, and we will get into that with this video too.
Data on attacks show that security had actually been improving. Detained at the presidential residence in Niger's capital, Bazoum said in his first remarks since the coup that he was a hostage and in need of U.S. and international help. If the coup succeeds, it will have devastating consequences for our country, our region, and the entire world, he wrote in a Washington Post opinion piece backing ECOWAS economic and travel sanctions.
Now, one thing I've noticed is that the people of Niger don't really have a voice within this story. Like, it's really hard to find individual interviews or opinions of just the average person within Niger on what they think. Now, I found a clip of protesters who are just like, get France out of here. We do not want France anymore. And again, it's really hard to find out why Niger doesn't mind the United States, but they hate France. And all I can really find is that they seem to think that the French are taking advantage of Niger.
The French army must get out of Niger. There's no reason for them to be in Niger. They are the terrorists.
Defense ministers from ECOWAS met for a second day in the Nigerian capital Abuja to discuss how to resolve the crisis. The Regional Economic and Security Organization says military intervention in Niger could be a last resort.
Now, if I'm going to be honest with you, there's almost no way to know what this conflict is going to look like, and these military generals are being very secretive on how they're going to bring in their military presence. We don't know if there's going to be like airstrikes. We don't know if there's going to even be boots on the ground. We don't know what's going to happen. The other issue is this. You still have the U.S. military within Niger. Where are they going to go? You have other African nations who are willing to turn on other African nations, and you have militant groups who are willing to fight on behalf of other African nations. You see why it can get really confusing and why, to me, these battle plans, I feel like, are being way too rushed. Like, how are you able to make battle plans in 2 days and you're ready to go after Niger? It doesn't make sense to me.
We've always been humble enough to listen to all the parties concerned and open to dialogue so that everyone's emotions have subsided. We can work together to
This is the coup leader of Niger.
create the conditions for a peaceful transition, leading in a relatively short and reasonable time to general elections, but above all to a better approach in our fight against terrorism and other economic and social ills.
Now, again, here's why things are confusing. Niger is saying, look, we did this coup because we didn't feel safe. But then you have the other side of the party, Niger's president, who's saying, look, the safety was better than ever. What are you talking about? But then you have the actual military saying there was no safety. We never felt safe. And the people of Niger felt the same way. So this is again why things are really confusing and why the U.S. military in the United States is not willing to call this a coup yet. They still see a way to get out of all of this and hopefully bring diplomacy and a democratic vote to a new president.
Senegal says it would participate in an ECOWAS military operation if the regional bloc is forced to intervene.
Why should our soldiers go there? They are going for two reasons. The first is because we are in a community organization that has decided that, and that is called ECOWAS. Senegal is an international signatory. We can't be a member of ECOWAS without subscribing to the decisions taken by it.
France, the former colonial power to which coup supporters have directed much of their anger, said it had completed an evacuation of over 1,000 people.
This is not the first time the French have been kicked out of an African country. Now, there's been a lot of speculation and debate on whether or not France is going to stay their grounds and participate in a conflict because, again, they do have a high stake in the uranium within Niger that helps power the nuclear plants up in France. But there's also many people saying that France does not necessarily need to purchase their uranium from Niger. They can still sustain themselves through other means and other buyers through their nuclear power.
Russia has condemned the coup, but some demonstrators have carried Russian flags. West African countries and their Western backers fear the Russian mercenary group Wagner, already helping Mali and Burkina Faso fight armed groups, may step into a security vacuum and offer Niger help also.
And Wagner is so sly with it. They are really good at their job. I am not saying they're good guys whatsoever. I'm saying they're bad guys. In fact, we've even seen evidence how they've done in Ukraine. We've seen evidence what they've done within motherland Russia. They were willing to march to Moscow. These are very confident troops, and they're very, very experienced troops. I mean, a lot of Wagner units trained Spetsnaz. A lot of Wagner was former Spetsnaz. And again, nonetheless, the fight is different in Africa because you have a bit of espionage. You have to form relations. elections. You have to prove to the local population that we are friends with you. And Wagner seems to have a system down where they're able to do this. We can see evidence of this within Mali, where they were able to kick out the UN. And Mali now totally almost depends on Wagner, Russia, to help back them. Same with Burkina Faso. And again, when you have two countries within this ECOWAS nation that have fallen to coups and are now backed by Wagner, who's to say they're not going to come into Niger, Africa? And also, the head of Wagner, Mr. Boghossian, has said, we are willing to offer up our services. But the thing is this, the United States is still in Niger, the French are not fully out, and there's other nations who are willing to go to battle. So I think Wagner is going to wait this one out, see what happens, and then completely wait for the country to fall apart. And that's the perfect time for Wagner to go into Niger and do what they do best. Try to secure a country and then force them to have a relationship with them and also be tied in with Russia.
And there are fears that armed groups responsible could take advantage of a further deterioration in the security situation. The new head of ECOWAS, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu, had raised concerns about the regional bloc's ability to prevent more coups and fight armed groups. And that was before the military takeover in Niger.
And ECOWAS has all agreed no more coups. We will all work together to try figuring out our differences. That is why military intervention probably will end up happening. When you form a coup within any country, turmoil happens, you have confusion, you have people who did support the president and now are mad at the opposition. There's a lot of things that happen that are not good when it comes to a coup. But worse for Niger is that now you have all this outside support, hundreds of millions of dollars that are not going to come in anymore. The U.S. military is going to be backed into a corner where they're going to have to leave. And now all of this support that was happening to Niger, they're now going to rely on themselves to do this. And as Niger has proven, they are not able to do this without outside militant groups who are unfortunately attacking local populations and so on. It's a terrible, terrible situation for the country of Niger.
And there are concerns about instability in Niger, and that's why the US State Department says that it's withdrawing some of its embassy officials from the country. Britain is doing the same, and France has evacuated all of its civilians.
And something else you should know is that President Biden has said you need to release the president of Niger, the president who was taken over by a coup, and he's saying I'm being held hostage, which is not a good thing. Now, at the end of the day, again, the United States has had way more patience than I thought they would, especially after what we've seen in Afghanistan and Sudan. And let me tell you something. This is like absolutely terrible for the Biden campaign if we're going to get a little political here. When you start to look at every single country that has fallen in turmoil and has had lost relationships with the United States, Niger looks like it's going to follow suit. Now, I'm not going to say this is the United States' fault. There is absolutely nothing we could have done other than hopefully special forces could have held ties with these coup leaders. And here's what's even more difficult to understand. U.S. Special Forces and the U.S. military have trained a lot of these coup leaders in their military operations. So if we see this all-out conflict, we are probably going to be seeing U.S. tactics being used against other African states, and then that could be turned against the United States saying, hey, look what you've created. You've trained a monster and so on. Who knows what can happen? Again, when coup takeovers happen, not a good thing. But one thing is for sure, the United States does not want this to happen. The United States is evacuating embassy elements, but the U.S. military is still there on restricted access. They have not done any other military operations that we know of. They are just chilling. Something else we should know also is that we don't know about any other militant movements. We don't know if there's more militant recruiting. But typically, when countries start to fall apart, this is the perfect recruitment opportunity, because what happens is these militant groups and these bandits, if you will, they bring in people who are desperate. Whether or not these civilians of Niger agree with militant groups, they will join them out of desperation. They will rob neighboring countries. They will go into other towns and take their food and resources because we are starving and this militant group is working with us. That is the ultimate fear across all of ECOWAS and all of these African nations. When your coup happens, Niger, it affects all of us, because if your country falls to militant groups and other military powers, you guys will probably come for us. So we're going to stop it on your home soil before you bring it to our home soil. Nonetheless, this is what's happening in Niger, Africa. It's terrible news, and I hope I was able to simplify it for you as much as I could. This is a very difficult topic, And if you're just new to the party, you probably will have to go and look at some history as to why France is there, why the United States is there, because it's a deep and rich history, and it can get rather complicated. Nonetheless, leave your comments and opinions down below, and we'll see you guys later.